You feel it the moment you wake up. Your throat is wrong. Your head is heavy. Your body is doing that thing where every blanket feels like it weighs 100 pounds. In 2025, you know exactly what this is. You've had it before. You'll take something, drink water, sleep it off. Maybe 3 days, maybe a week. You'll be fine. Now forget all of that. It's 1520. You wake up with the same symptoms, same scratchy throat, same pounding head, same heavy limbs. But there is no medicine cabinet. There is no doctor who went to medical school. There is no understanding of what is actually happening inside your body at a biological level. There is, however, a man with a knife, and he is very confident he can help. And behind him, there's another man with a bucket of leeches. He's also confident. And behind him, there's a woman with a pouch of dried herbs, a chart of the planets, and an extremely specific opinion about what the moon was doing last Tuesday. All three of them are about to treat your fever. Let's talk about what getting sick 500 years ago actually looked like. From the first symptom to the final treatment, which was, in almost every case, worse than the disease. The diagnosis. Before anyone could treat you, someone had to figure out what was wrong. Medieval diagnosis did not involve listening to your chest. It did not involve taking your temperature or drawing blood for a lab test. It involved looking at your urine. The physician, if you could afford one, which most people could not, would collect a sample of your urine in a glass flask. He would hold it up to the light. He would examine the colour, the clarity, the smell. In some documented cases, the taste. There was an entire published system for this, a uroscopy wheel, a circular chart that matched urine colours to specific diseases. Dark brown meant one thing, pale yellow meant another, cloudy meant something was wrong with your kidneys, reddish suggested fever, greenish suggested something worse. This sounds absurd, but here is the uncomfortable truth. Urine examination was actually one of the more accurate diagnostic tools of the era. Modern medicine still uses urine analysis. The medieval version was primitive, but the instinct was not entirely wrong. The less accurate diagnostic tools involved the stars. Medieval physicians genuinely believed that the alignment of the planets influenced human health. Jupiter governed the liver, Saturn governed the spleen, the moon influenced fluid in the body. Before performing surgery, some physicians consulted an astrological calendar to identify the correct day to operate. If Mars was in the wrong position, your surgery was postponed. Your survival, in other words, depended partly on where a ball of rock 140 million miles away happened to be sitting that week. The theory. To understand why medieval medicine works the way it did, you have to understand what physicians actually believed about the human body. They believed it contained 4 substances called humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile. Health meant these 4 were in perfect balance. Sickness meant one had gotten out of control. Every symptom mapped to a specific humour. Fever meant too much blood. Lethargy meant too much phlegm. Anger and agitation meant too much yellow bile. Depression and darkness meant too much black bile. This system came from ancient Greece. From Hippocrates and Galen, physicians so respected that their writings dominated medical thinking for over 1,000 years after their deaths. Nobody seriously questioned it. Because in the absence of microscopes, in the absence of any understanding of bacteria or viruses or cellular biology, the 4 humours theory was internally consistent. It explained symptoms. It suggested treatments. It gave physicians a framework for understanding an invisible world they had no tools to see. The framework was completely wrong, but it was confident. And confidence in medicine has always been worth something, even when the medicine itself is useless. The treatments. Bloodletting was just the beginning. If removing blood didn't fix the problem, and often it didn't because the patient was now weaker than before, the next option was purging. Physicians would administer powerful laxatives to force the bad humours out of the body through the digestive system. Herbal concoctions, mineral compounds, and substances that modern chemistry would classify as extremely dangerous. The most commonly used was calomel, mercury chloride, mercury, given to sick people. As medicine, mercury poisoning causes nausea, vomiting, tremors, kidney failure, and severe neurological damage. Physicians of the era interpreted the violent physical reaction as evidence that the treatment was working. The humours were being expelled. The more violently the patient reacted, the more effective the treatment appeared. The patient was being poisoned on top of being sick, and the poisoning was logged as progress. After purging came sweating. The patient was placed in an extremely hot room. Blankets were piled on. A fire was kept burning. The goal was to force the toxins out through the skin via sweat. The result was severe dehydration on top of everything else. And if none of that worked, there were always the leeches. Medicinal leeches were applied directly to the skin near the site of pain or swelling. They were used for headaches, eye infections, skin conditions, and internal inflammation. The logic: the leech would draw out the corrupt blood specifically, leaving the healthy blood behind. Leeches actually do have some legitimate medical applications. Modern surgeons still use them in very specific reconstructive procedures, but applying 40 leeches to a delirious fever patient in 1520 was not one of those applications. The surgery. Everything we've discussed so far assumes you had something the body might eventually manage on its own. A fever, an infection, a humoral imbalance that nature might correct despite the physician's best efforts. But what if you needed surgery? What if you had a wound that wouldn't close, a limb that had turned black with infection, an abscess pressing against something vital? Then you entered a completely different category of experience. There was no anesthesia. Let that settle. No anesthesia. No painkillers beyond alcohol, opium in rare cases, and herbal preparations that barely took the edge off. Surgery was performed on fully conscious, fully aware human beings who were held down by assistants while the surgeon worked. The most valuable skill a surgeon could possess was speed. A leg amputation performed in under 90 seconds was considered expert work. Surgeons practiced obsessively, on cadavers, on animals, to shave seconds off their time, because every second on that table was a second of conscious, unmedicated agony that the patient had to survive before the real danger began. The real danger was what came after. Medieval surgeons did not know about infection. They did not sterilize their instruments. They did not wash their hands between patients. The same blade that opened one patient was wiped on a cloth and used on the next. After surgery, wounds were treated in one of two ways. The first, boiling oil poured directly into the wound. Physicians believed this sterilized the area and promoted healing. It caused severe burns layered directly on top of the surgical wound. It caused additional tissue death. And it caused the kind of pain that patients who survived described as worse than the surgery itself. The second, a red-hot iron pressed against the flesh to cauterize the wound closed. After all of this, the surgery, the boiling oil or the iron, the days of fever that followed, infection came anyway. Because germ theory wouldn't exist for another 300 years, because nobody could see the bacteria on the blade. Because the concept of washing hands before touching a wound wouldn't be understood until 1847, when a physician named Ignaz Semmelweis noticed that patients treated by doctors who washed their hands died significantly less often. He was laughed out of the medical establishment. He was right. They were wrong. And it took decades for anyone to admit it. Here is what is remarkable about all of this. The physicians of the medieval world were not stupid. They were not cruel. They were not indifferent to suffering. Most of them went into medicine specifically because they wanted to reduce it. They were working with the information available to them. They observed, they theorized, they built systems that were internally consistent given what they could see and measure. Those systems were wrong, catastrophically, lethally wrong, but they represented the absolute best that human understanding could produce at that moment in history. Germ theory, 1860s, antibiotics, 1920s, modern anesthesia, 1840s, sterile surgical technique, 1870s. Every single one of those advancements happened because someone looked at the evidence, looked at the outcomes, and said out loud, what we are currently doing is not working, and we need to find out why. You woke up this morning with a scratchy throat. You have ibuprofen. You have antibiotics if you need them. You have a doctor who spent 10 years learning microbiology, pharmacology, and surgical technique. You have a medical system built on 300 years of accumulated, tested, corrected knowledge. 500 years ago, someone woke up with the same scratchy throat, and 3 people were already arguing about whether Mars or Saturn was responsible. Subscribe to Just About Human. Your ancestors survived all of this, somehow.